The UN is actively helping to facilitate illegal immigration into the United States, down in Panama and at the U.S.-Mexican border. Watch my video, find out all about it.
You are seeing the most well-oiled, industrialized human smuggling assembly line machine anywhere on the planet. It roars all day and night, far beyond American awareness. In and around this far northwest Colombia village named Capurganá. As far away as it is, this people-moving machine in northwestern Colombia matters to the American public because it has mainlined nearly 2 million foreign nationals, like these the last few years, into American cities, but also ones like these, including hundreds on the U.S. terrorism watch list and criminal aliens among total strangers from 150 nations like China. Boatload by boatload across the Gulf of Urabá and into the famous Darien Gap migration choke point to Panama and on to the U.S. southern border. They arrive on buses and taxis in towns on one side of the Gulf, and then boat across to towns on the other side and head into the Darien Gap.
You want to talk about a real tragedy? It's right here in the canal zone of Panama City. This whole facility used to be controlled by the U.S. government. It was a military base to protect the Panama Canal. Jimmy Carter gave it away, and now it's basically been taken over by the United Nations and NGOs. One of those right here, OIM, Organization of International Migration. They're the same organization that were handing out condoms and birth control to illegal aliens before they came over the Darien Gap into Panama. Rather than saying, stop, don't do it, they said, here's some condoms, here's some birth control for when you get raped on the way. That's how disgusting these organizations are. They pretend to be good, and all they're doing is feeding on human misery. And this entire facility here, almost every single building here now is either United Nations operation. You've got UNICEF on the other side of this building. You've got the UNHCR. Now they have 2 buildings. That's the refugee side of the United Nations. They've got 2 buildings because they've had to expand. They got too big for this. And on top of that, you even have the Clinton Foundation out here. These organizations need to be defunded, and they need to be investigated for trafficking. They are part of what the cartel's doing. You can't just blame the cartel. These organizations have to come down to. Not another dime of taxpayer dollars should go to the United Nations, and in particular, not to OIM. While they're sitting here living in luxury, they're inviting people to put their lives at risk, to put their children's lives at risk, to illegally travel out of their country and head to the United States to break into our country. Dear Kamala Harris, this is the root cause. The leftist, godless, globalist organizations that you support.
They're loading up here. They'll be going to the camp number 1. With permitted access in Akandi, the center toured a Gulf Clan-controlled migrant camp, though no filming was allowed inside. Operatives controlled access to the perimeter. So who is allowed inside? Colombian banks and Western Union providing money wiring service.
So here we got the Western Union. It's right in the spot that's between the 2 docks. Western Union.
In and around the UN and NGOs, Gulf Cartel operatives charge immigrants as much as $300 per head cash for permission to buy a ferry ticket and cross the Gulf.
Oh, it's like that.
You paid $350 to who? To some
one of the mafia people.
Are they at the bus station?
Their bus would come here to the station.
Then hundreds more for a guide once they arrive in towns like Capurganá and Akandi. They tried to charge even me as my taxi entered the ferryboat terminal in Turbo, stopping the taxi but then looking in through the window before determining that I was no immigrant and letting us through.
Pinta. Because of the way we look, and they probably saw you're an American, so they
just
like,
looked
no.
right in through the windshield and just said,
no, they can tell.
Much in the way of U.S. national and homeland security is riding on Panama's plan to close the Darien Gap. The Biden-Harris White House was supposed to help Panama pressure its ally Colombia to shut this down. Promised American money for deportation flights out of Panama hasn't showed up, forcing Panama to keep its side of the border open still. But the Clan del Golfo, the United Nations, migrant help groups, and the Colombian government, and thousands upon thousands of illegal immigrants who will end up living in America are still on the machine.
And the UN support doesn't stop at the Darien Gap down in Panama. It continues all the way through Central America, Mexico, right up on the U.S.-Mexican border. This is a story from the United Nations News. This is from 2021. UN agencies begin registering asylum seekers at U.S.-Mexico border. UN agencies have begun preparing individuals and families at the Matamoros informal camp near the United States-Mexico border for entry into the U.S., following the termination of a policy that forced asylum seekers to wait for immigration hearings in Mexico. According to the agencies involved, an initial group could be allowed to enter the U.S. this week, pending approval by authorities there. Really, UN, huh? In a joint news release, the UN agencies said that the U.S.-Mexican governments prioritized the Matamoros camp due to the difficult humanitarian conditions there. Other individuals with active MPP cases living outside the Matamoros camp will also be processed, they added. An estimated 25,000 applicants being processed in the U.S. were returned to Mexico under the policy known as the Migrant Protection Protocols. After the policy was terminated, a first group with active MPP cases entered the U.S. on 19th February at the San Ysidro port of entry between Tijuana and San Diego. UN support. The UN agencies involved in the exercise, the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, the International Organization for Migration, and the UN Children's Fund, are conducting in-person registrations, ensuring humane treatment of children and their families, and carrying out COVID-19 tests. So far, no cases of COVID have been detected. In coordination with U.S. authorities, UNHCR launched a website on 19th February for people with active MPP cases to pre-register. About 12,000 people signed up in the first 3 days of the operation. The website is supplemented by alternative registration channels, including email, social media, and telephone. Similarly, in addition to conducting COVID-19 testing, IOM is coordinating transportation to the designated ports of entry. UNICEF is offering support for the most vulnerable child protection cases, providing information to families and children.